Saab started out as an aviation company, and it would be easy to assume that it moved into cars for the same reason many other companies did, simply to expand its business. But in reality, the story was quite different. If Saab's aircraft largely owed their existence to the Second World War, then its cars appeared because that war had come to an end. So, let's start from the beginning. By the late 1930s, the sense of an approaching large-scale war was already in the air, and Sweden understood that well. At the time, its military relied heavily on imported equipment, including aircraft, with American, British, German, and even Dutch planes in service. But as the conflict drew closer, that dependence became increasingly risky. Supplies could be cut off at any moment. In response, the Swedish government decided to build its own aviation industry, while also acquiring licenses from Northrop and Junkers. It was within this program that, in 1937, a company with the long name Svenska Aeroplan Aktiebolaget was founded in Trollhättan, or simply Saab. That's where the story begins. Sweden entered World War II in a formally neutral position. It did not join alliances or declare war, but in practice, the situation was far more complicated. The country maintained economic ties with Nazi Germany, supplying, among other things, iron ore that was critical for German industry. In the early years of the war, Sweden also allowed German troop transit across its territory, mainly to and from occupied Norway. This was largely a forced decision. Despite ongoing rearmament, there was no certainty the country could withstand pressure or a potential occupation. Against this backdrop, Saab gradually moved away from licensed production and shifted to its own designs. In 1940, the Saab 17 light bomber took to the air, followed soon after by work on the more complex and unconventional Saab 21 fighter. These aircraft never saw combat, but over the course of the war, Saab turned into a fully developed engineering center with multiple production sites. And by that point, it was already clear that once the war ended, military orders would inevitably decline. In post-war Europe, car makers found themselves in a situation where the goal was not to impress, but simply to survive. Production focused on pre-war models that could be quickly brought back, while demand shifted toward the most affordable cars. A proper mid-size segment would only take shape later, as the economy recovered. After military orders declined, Saab also had to look for a new direction. The automotive industry was a logical choice. The market was expected to grow alongside Europe's recovery. Freed up production capacity, accumulated engineering experience, and rising demand for simple cars pushed the company in that direction. In 1945 to 1946, Saab launched an internal car project handled by a small team of about 15 to 20 people, mostly engineers from its aviation division. Gunnar Lundström played a key role in development, while the design was led by Sixten Sässen. In 1946, the first prototype appeared on the road, carrying an unusual numerical index. The production car would later be called 92, and that was no coincidence. Saab's aircraft had been numbered from 1 to 89, followed by civilian models 90 and 91, making 92 the next logical step. The first prototype was never meant for production. Its purpose was to test the concept itself, to see if it was viable at all. And visually, it stood out, especially compared to typical cars of that time. The construction was unusual as well. A unibody assembled by hand from large panels, adjusted during the build process. But the key focus from the very beginning was aerodynamics. Engineers coming from aviation aimed to make the body as streamlined as possible, approaching a teardrop shape, even paying attention to a relatively flat underbody. As a result, the Saab did not look like a conventional car, but more like something shaped by aviation principles. Its drag coefficient was around 0.30, an impressive figure even by modern standards, and nearly twice as good as the average at the time. Prototypes covered hundreds of thousands of kilometers during testing. Because the project was kept secret, most of these tests took place on empty roads, early in the morning or late at night. Over several years of development, Saab created its own powertrain, though it was based in part on solutions from DKW, particularly the two-stroke layout. This is important because it is often said that Saab had no in-house development until the Model 99. But in reality, this was more an evolution of a borrowed concept than simple copying. By the late 1940s, the European market was only beginning to recover, and most cars were still based on pre-war designs. Completely new models were starting to appear, but they were still relatively rare. Thus, in 1949, the production Saab 92 largely met expectations. The car was well received by both the public and the press. Two versions had originally been planned, but in the end, only the more expensive one was kept, and the idea of a budget variant was abandoned. From the very beginning, Saab positioned itself in the above-average segment, a direction the company would follow all the way to the end. Technically, the production car remained close to the final prototypes, but its appearance changed noticeably. The body gained smoother, more rounded forms, with more pronounced wheel arches and a revised front end. While overall dimensions stayed the same, interior width increased thanks to changes in the body sides and glazing, which also led to larger front and rear windows. It used a transversely mounted two-stroke two-cylinder engine with a displacement of 764 cubic centimeters, producing 25 horsepower, along with a thermosiphon cooling system. All early Saab 92 cars from 1949 to 1950 were painted only in a dark green color, often mistaken for British racing green, although it was a different shade. The initial version remained in production until 1953. Imported components accounted for no more than 17%, and although assembly was done on a production line, it remained largely unmechanized. In 1953, the Saab 92B was introduced. It gained a proper trunk lid, a larger rear window for better visibility, and an optional sliding fabric roof. Engine output increased to 28 horsepower. In the mid-1950s, the lighting was updated, new colors were added, and the bumpers were redesigned. Over nearly 6 years, Saab 92 and 92B models reached a total production of just over 20,000 units, with a few hundred additional cars used for testing, exhibitions, and motorsport. In late 1955, Saab introduced a new model to the public, the 93. In essence, it was a deep update of the 92B, but with a new index, most likely for marketing reasons. On the outside, the car changed very little, the same shapes and proportions, with differences limited to a new front grille and trim. The real changes were under the hood. The two-cylinder two-stroke engine was replaced by a three-cylinder unit, with a displacement of 748 cubic centimeters and an output of 33 horsepower, now mounted longitudinally. At the same time, the transmission was updated and received a freewheel mechanism, an important feature for engines of this type. A two-stroke engine has no separate lubrication system. Oil is mixed with the fuel. During engine braking, the fuel supply is reduced, which also cuts off lubrication and can lead to increased wear. The freewheel helped avoid this by preventing the engine from being driven without proper lubrication. With the Saab 93, the company also began to seriously enter export markets. As early as 1956, the first hundreds of cars were shipped to the United States, and despite the small volumes, for a small Swedish company, this could already be considered a success. Like the 92, the 93 was not competing with the major European and American brands. Saab was seen more as an engineering alternative, a kind of aviation-inspired oddity, something the company itself actively emphasized. For buyers, it was a smart alternative to mass-market cars like the Volkswagen Beetle or the Citroën 2CV, while the brand's image remained consistently strong. In 1958, following its success in motorsport, Saab introduced the Gran Turismo 750. Compared to the standard 93, it featured an engine tuned up to 55 horsepower, factory fog lights, brighter paint options, and a set of rally-style instruments. A year later, in 1959, Saab introduced the 95, a wagon, a body style that was just beginning to gain popularity in Europe. At first, only about 40 cars were built using 93 components, but from 1960 onward, the model switched to the mechanicals of the Saab 96, with both models evolving in parallel. That same year brought a major update. The engine finally received liquid cooling, and the door hinges were moved to the front. However, in this form, the model lasted less than a year before being replaced by the Saab 96. Over 4 years, a total of 52,731 Saab 93 units were produced across all versions. By the standards of large manufacturers, that was not much. But for Saab, it marked steady growth. Sales increased slowly but consistently, year after year. The story of Saab's early models turned out much like the cars themselves. Calm, consistent, without sharp jumps or dramatic turns. And that was exactly the point. These were not cars trying to catch up with anyone or impress. They were built around engineering logic, sometimes unusual, sometimes unconventional, but always deliberate. And that's where the entire Saab story really begins, with an approach where it mattered more to do things their own way than to follow everyone else. After this would come the 96, the 99, turbocharging, and everything that would make Saab truly recognizable. But the foundation was laid right here.